Well, the Chinese, of course, first immigrated because of the attraction of gold mining and then eventually constructing railroads throughout Nevada. They built the Transcontinental Railroad, the first Transcontinental Railroad, but also they were involved in the Virginia and Truckee, Carson, Colorado, Eureka and Palisades, you name it, they were active in building it. They also were active in building a lot of the logging trains that provided the lumber for the railroads and for mining, especially the Comstock mining. At first, it was free immigration, so men and women, not too many women, came because traditionally women stayed at home, took care of their in-laws, raised the children, had the support of the community, had relatives all around. But a few women came with their husbands. And then in 1875, the Page Law was enacted, which essentially for women meant that they had to go to Hong Kong or Canton and prove that they were not a prostitute. Okay, now if you think of a farm woman making that long trip, sometimes it took a week or two, and then trying to speak Chinese to an American and prove that she was married to Mr. So-and-so who was in the United States, what you find is that there are very few women who actually could make it into the United States, other than the prostitutes, which the Page Law was trying to prevent, because they, of course, had coaching and they had money to get to the interview and so forth. And so what we see is a real drop-off of Chinese women coming after 1875. And then in 1882, the first National Chinese Exclusion Act was passed, and in this Exclusion Act it included all laborers, and all women who were not in a profession were then classified as laborers. So even if you were a wife, well, too bad. The only women who could come over were wives of merchants or students. And so there weren't a lot of students, but there were a few trickles of female students who managed to come over between 1882 and, let's say, 1943, when the Chinese Exclusion Act was finally repealed. The women then caused, essentially American laws caused the Chinese society to be a bachelor or single man society. But about 50% of the men were actually married, leaving their wives at home with their parents and their brothers and sisters and so forth, but living this kind of separate life. And what we see happening is that it was up to the women who were born in the United States to help try to balance the ratio between men to women. Now, according to the census, which is completely inaccurate, because I have names of women who got married through their marriage license or through a newspaper article announcing X married Y and so forth, they're never in the census. And they're never in the census because the census taker couldn't find them or didn't know where they were, or they stayed basically at home and they didn't wander out in the streets. They were basically homebodies in the beginning. And so we have at one point a ratio of 33 men to every woman. Now that's the kind of ratio I can live with, but the men had a hard time with that. And what we see happening then is that the men began to look for whomever they could find to get married to and raise a family, because family is very important in the Chinese tradition. And we'll see marriages of the early women from married to men 28 years their senior. That was not unusual. And women married at the age of 14 or 16 because there was such a shortage of women.